much more than that. They're more about, as I say, they're not just existential commitment, but they might carry other sorts of commitments with it too. For example, if you actually believe that a God exists, that should not just change other things in your belief system, it should probably change your conduct. It may have a profound influence on your moral behavior. There ought to be some other sort of behavioral change. And in fact, some have suggested that indeed that's very important for religion, because if all religion was mere belief commitment, that something exists, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between, let's say, religions and perhaps other sorts of stories about things that may or may not have actually happened, like histories, where we have these histories from bygone days, but now we just can't really verify any of it. But religion is not just stories about unusual goings-on. If that's all it were, it wouldn't make religion terribly distinctive from other kinds of narratives. Religion instead really carries not just existential commitment, but some sort of conduct commitment, and that might be the real significance of it. It's not just about error, or if it is just about error, it's got to be about so much more. And as I suggest there in my premise number 2, it might have to do specifically not just with religion, with a person's conduct, but with the regulation of a person's conduct, how they try to conduct themselves. This suggests a sort of pragmatic approach to understanding these sorts of existential belief commitments. It's not just X exists, right? God exists, or an angel exists, or Jesus exists. It might be something along of the form, I ought to be in our relationship, some sort of relationship with that X. And of course, once we get into establishing relationships with something, this business of relationship really now leads us into the realm of conduct. Because in order to sustain and improve and fix a relationship, you've got to do something. This is an active social relationship. This is about engagement. This is about getting in tune with something. This is about fulfilling obligations. This is something about perhaps taking care of things. You've got to do something. Okay? So that's the pragmatism, a sort of pragmatic, if you will, a pragmatic account of what might be really important about religious belief. If 1 and 2 are right, then 3 seems plausible. If we're interested in the validity of this sort of existential commitment, then it wouldn't lie in just sort of a simplistic verification, as if all we have to do is go see if that thing exists. It's got to be more complicated than that. If it's about sustaining a relationship, then the validity would instead depend on whether the resulting conduct inspired by wanting to be in that relationship actually meets the standards of that relationship. Are you the kind of person that you ought to be because you have that belief commitment? And then that in turn only suggests, but it's very interestingly suggests, that beliefs are religious as opposed to just accepting a narrative or enjoying some sort of piece of fiction. Beliefs are religious to the extent that they commit one to a preeminent project, a most important project in your life, of fulfilling some sort of ideal relationship. If the relationship already existed perfectly, then you wouldn't have to change your conduct. But clearly when we're talking about religion, conduct is modified. One is always trying to modify one's conduct in light of some sort of ideal, and so this would then be the pragmatist behavioral account of it. However, even if I've been pulling you along so far, take a look at number 5. As ideal, belief's object, which is now even not just a static object, it's more like an objective. Belief's objective is non-rational and non-natural in religions. Commitment is not so much what to exist now, but commitment is rather to what might come to exist. It becomes future-oriented. It's not about a static relationship. Okay? And so this will help us try to understand why religions get away with appearing to be errors from the naturalistic perspective. Yeah, they're errors. They're counterintuitive. From a naturalistic perspective, they're non-factual. Those gods don't exist. But that doesn't help at all evaluating what it's like for a religious person to have that religious belief. Okay? And I think we have to take this very seriously. And this connects up with the third aspect of understanding the mind on religion, behavior coordination, specifically sustaining communal practices and rituals. And of course, anthropology now can get involved. If it wasn't already, it can certainly come front and center now. Religious practices clearly have social functions for fulfilling certain kinds of social objectives. Now that's the validity problem, though. Does that make them right or true or valid? Does that prove that God exists? Not really, because, of course, keep in mind, as I say there, belief systems, of course, can construct those objectives through the indoctrination, particularly indoctrination of the young. So, and I'll pick a controversial example. You folks were wondering when the controversy would start, so let's get it going. Suppose somebody said, well, I'm religious because I believe that I have a soul, and that soul is in jeopardy when I die, and I want to make sure good things happen to me, my soul, so that's why I'm a Christian. Of course, how did that person come to believe that they have an immortal soul in the first place? And how did that person come to even imagine an ideal objective into the future about doing something about the state of one's future soul? They weren't born with this as babies, right? This belief system, this sort of objective. Probably they were raised or heard about or were indoctrinated in some way into the belief that they have an immortal soul. So you have to watch for just assuming that these objectives just sort of exist out there. They exist because cultures instill in them. And this isn't, of course, just true about religions. Infants are born quite ignorant about wide variety, indeed virtually everything about culture. This also tells us that social ideals and personal needs can vary enormously from epoch to epoch and from culture to culture. So it's very hard to say, religion has this objective. No, you can't. That's not a good way of organizing your thoughts about religion or defining religion, because of course different religions can organize objectives exceedingly differently. This suggests then that it's impossible to tell whether any religion is more adaptive or natural or humanly fitting than any other, right? It's already too much culture. You can't get at what a human being would believe if they had no culture, and then see if a religion or another religion or no religion would be a better fit with this proto-original human being. Ain't no such animal. Right? There's babies and there's us. And we know that babies don't have religious belief systems, and we know that we do. And we know that it's culture doing the work. So you can't get behind culture. Right? It's too late. All we can do is study the different cultures. And of course, this general point goes for any other cultural artifacts, such as any politics. It's impossible to tell whether any form of government is more adaptive or natural or human fitting, if we mean by that the true human being, right? It's too late for us. We're cultural creatures. Or to put it another way, for Homo sapiens right now, it is natural for us to have some culture or another. Now, these three things, I've been investigating them separately, but hopefully it's already occurred to you that they're deeply, and rightly so, tightly connected. And so this triangle gets at the start of suggesting some deep connections. And we're seeing this sort of conceptual framework for understanding religion in not only the authors that I mentioned already, but many others. So religion then, from a psychological standpoint, would have three main components. Again, there we have the brain, watching the brain on religion, correlating what it's like for the individual to have the religious experiences and the beliefs and the commitments and what their brain is doing, the belief commitment, and then behavior in the community. And these are connected, and I just offered three different sides of the triangle, and there are more ways of interconnecting them. But it occurs to me that the brain on religious experience is connected with belief commitment because